This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, John Rauda back again with episode 59 of A Geek Leader, and today on the show I've got Kent C. Dodds. And Kent is a full-stack JavaScript engineer, works at PayPal, and he's very involved in the open source community. He's an instructor, a speaker that I've watched some of his talks on YouTube. He's also a Google developer expert. He's married with 4 kids, and today on the show we talked about how to learn things by teaching. We talked about his journey through technology, how being grateful makes a big impact on your life, and just some general things that will make you a better developer and a happier developer. And with all that being said, give it up for Kent C. Dodds. And we're live here with Kent C. Dodds. And Kent, if you would, could you tell the audience just a little bit about kind of your journey through technology, kind of what you're doing now and how you got to that point?
Yeah, sure. So thanks so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it. I got into technology. Like I can give you the long version or the short version. Which would you prefer here?
Well, let's go with the long version. And I may interrupt you if it gets too long.
Okay. You're going to learn pretty quick. I can be kind of long-winded. Feel free to interrupt me. So, I got into when I was a kid, my friend liked programming, thought it was pretty cool. He wrote C, and we had this dream that we were going to build a game that would be one of those online games, and people would just pay to play, and you build it, and then all of a sudden money comes in, and it's passive income. It's amazing. And we were both planning on going on a mission, and for my church. So for 2 years, we just have the game running, and we come home, we are millionaires or something. But that didn't quite work out. He built the server, and then I was like, yeah, okay, I want to help build this. And he's like, okay, cool, let me teach you programming. And he said, well, so this is a Boolean. He thought that would be he started with a number. This is a number. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I get numbers. I can do that. And he said, okay, now this is a Boolean. I'm going to say, okay, Boolean. I'm not sure I understand why that would be useful, but okay, true, false, I got it. And then he said, now this is a string. And for some reason, I just couldn't get it. It made no sense to me.
Yeah, it's a huge string, right?
Yeah, it's like yarn. What are you talking about? So yeah, it made no sense to me, and I decided, okay, I guess programming is your thing, Tyler. This is not my thing. And so from that time, I just decided, okay, I can play video games, and I can I made videos. I did a lot of video making as a kid, but programming computers, I decided was just not something I was skilled at. And then when I went to college, I wanted to go into electrical engineering, mostly because my older brother did that, and he was pretty happy with what he was doing, and I kind of wanted to do what he was doing. So I went into electrical engineering. I took 2 programming classes, and I was like, oh, great, I've got to do this programming thing. I was sort of excited, but sort of trepidatious, I guess. And I remember this distinct feeling that there's no way I could program for a job. I had 16 hours of homework, pretty much a week worth of programming homework. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to sit in front of a computer for 8 hours a day. I can barely do 16 hours a week. So that was pretty much my experience with programming in the early days, when I just didn't really like it all that much. I did well, pretty well. I wasn't super good at machine code or assembly or C. I didn't really enjoy those very much, but Java was okay. Yeah. I don't know.
I didn't really like Java that much either, but I liked it at first. And then when I learned other languages, I did not like Java anymore.
Yeah. Yep. That's coming up. Yep. Yeah. So I was I did pretty well, and I actually, in an effort to learn it better and do better in the class, I volunteered to tutor. And so that kind of forced me into this spot of I got to finish my homework early so I can help other people do theirs. And that was a really rewarding experience. And so I did well in the class, but I I just didn't really enjoy the subject material. So anyway, I did end up going on my mission for my church for 2 years. And then when I got back, I started into things again. And that was when I took my first college math class. And I just did terrible. I thought that I was really good at math, but I'm not, I guess. And I did really poorly in math. I barely scraped by enough to like get my general requirements for math. And so I said, okay, I guess I'm not going to be an electrical engineer if I can't do math. So I bounced around a couple places, and then and this is at BYU. I don't think I mentioned that, Brigham Young University in Utah.
Yeah. So when you did your mission, was that while you were in college, or?
No, the mission is something that most young men in my church do. Is like when you turn 18, like graduate from high school, then you go out for 2 years on a mission. I went to Kansas and Missouri. It was a cool experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Learned a lot. So yeah, then I did really like terrible at math. I decided, okay, EE is not for me. And I bounced around a couple of different ideas. Like I was thinking, okay, physics, or like that was always interesting. I liked Roller Coaster Tycoon. So like, but that wasn't it. And chemical engineering, I did terrible at chemistry. So eventually my dad convinced me to try out accounting. He's a CPA, or he was, he retired recently, but I tried. I was like, yeah, surprisingly, this is kind of interesting. The first class, but the second class was like the worst. I really did not like accounting. But in the process of getting into the business school, I had to take an information systems class, and that I did some Excel, like programming, VBA, and like a website with HTML and CSS. And I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. So now like programming actually can solve business needs, or like actual real world use cases. Whereas before, my programming had all been like, here's what a linked list is, and let's build our own implementation of a linked list. And next year you get to build your own compiler. Isn't that exciting? And I was like, no, that's not exciting at all. And in addition, like when they started teaching us programming, they're like, and here's your editor. It's called Vim. And like, it's like, no, that is not fun. How do you think that's fun? And so when I learned that programming could actually be fun, and that you can, not to say that building a compiler isn't fun, it just wasn't fun for me. It wasn't what I was interested in. I wanted to build actual solutions that people would use, that could solve real world problems for more people. So anyway, that's where I decided, okay, so I don't like this accounting thing, but this information systems thing is kind of cool. And in most schools, I found out later, information systems isn't really programming. It's more like networking and program or product management and things like that. At BYU, there's a fair bit more programming focus. And so when I still wasn't convinced I wanted to program. I just wanted to use computers to solve real world use cases. And so when I started into the program, I also got an internship at a company that needed me to do a lot of monkey work. And so I was taking a Java class, and I was doing all this monkey work, just like uploading videos and adding metadata and stuff. It was just super boring. And so I thought, I'm doing this programming thing. I wonder if I can program my way out of this monkey work, just automate all of this stuff. And I've found the YouTube APIs and the Vimeo APIs, and learned how to interact with those and upload the videos automatically and add the metadata automatically and all that stuff to automate my job. And I found that to be super fulfilling. It was just so awesome to kick this thing off at night and come back and had done like basically 3 months worth of work if I'd just done it myself. It was just so cool. So that's where I really got into programming. I can keep going on the story to talk about how I got into JavaScript where I am now, but that was pretty much the getting me interested in programming.
So I'm curious about, like, from your career, you were doing this as you called it, monkey work, which I think we've all started out somewhere near there.
Yeah.
And when you automated you automated yourself out of a job. What was that like for your boss, or were you? Did you have a really good boss that was like accepting of that, or was it more like, oh, we don't need you anymore? What
Yeah.
was that like?
No, that's great. Actually, I talked to my boss about it. I said, "Hey, listen, so like I'm pretty sure that I could program something so I could be more efficient." They're like, "Yeah, totally, do that." As always, like you have to halt progress for a couple days or weeks before you can make any progress. And so like I had to pass it off with them, but they said, yeah, totally do it. And I did. And they were so happy with me because they had tons of stuff to do. And so while the program was doing that thing, they needed me to do other things. And I automated a bunch of stuff for them. And they were so happy with me. This was a nonprofit. It's called the More Good Foundation. And they were so happy with me that they had a board meeting with all their donators, or what are those called?
Patreons.
Yeah, the people who are paying for this nonprofit. And so they had me come give a presentation. And I'm still this kid in school who has no idea what he's doing, but I gave a presentation on the software that I wrote and showed them how it works, and they used it as a way to say, hey, listen, we're innovating. And like, so it was super cool. Like, what a cool experience for me getting into the software world where I can say, hey, I use this technology thing to make myself more productive and do cool things for the company I'm working for. And getting in front of people of that influence was just an awesome experience. So they gave me, like I'll never be able to thank them enough for giving me a chance to try something out and learn to program, basically, be really, really motivated to do well. And yeah, so they were super, super happy with me.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how sometimes something small comes in where you try something a little bit different and it totally changes the path of your life?
Yeah. Like you can sometimes, like lots of times, it's not just the one thing that that made all the difference. It's like many little things, but there are some times in my life where I can point to that and say that made a huge difference, a huge impact on my career and my trajectory, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So after you've created this automation tools, you've had this success. How did you get into actually developing with JavaScript where you're at now?
Well, yeah. So I was still in school, and I got a new internship at actually my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They have a really big IT department, and I was still not convinced I was going to program for the rest of my life. I wanted to try business intelligence. That sounded really cool. I was like, yeah, I can hang out in Excel all day, all night. Like, I love this thing. So I thought that was what what BI was all about. And in some ways it sort of is. But anyway, so I got to my internship, and the star schemas and writing ETLs and like doing database queries and stuff. It was all kind of interesting to me, but I just somehow found a way to automate more tasks with programming. I did more programming, like, hey, we need to generate these reports based off of these ETL jobs that we're doing and stuff, and we need to send emails automatically and stuff. And the tools we have don't support that. And so I wrote a program I actually built on top of a program somebody else wrote to support sending out these emails. And I'm pretty sure it's still in use. This was like almost maybe 5 years ago or so. And I'm pretty sure they're still using it to send like thousands of emails a week to leaders in the church and things, giving them reports on stuff. But yeah, I spent most of my internship automating things using Java still. And so that was when I realized, okay, I guess I am a programmer. I'm going to accept it and embrace it. That's what I want to do. And they kept me on even when school started back up in the summer or after the summer. And I was looking for my next internship for the following summer, just like looking around. I landed my resume with a company here in Utah called Domo, which many people may have heard of. They're a big sponsor of the NG-Conf that's held here. But they are doing business intelligence as a platform kind of thing. They're business management software. And so they were interested in my business intelligence background, but also my like programming skills. And so they had me in and interviewed, and I started up there. What I started as, though, they wanted me to automate, do like quality automation, so like testing, and I was going to start testing their Java APIs using Ruby, a programming language I'd never used before. And of course, the person who is my mentor to get me started is using Vim, and I have no idea. Like, I'm so confused with what he's doing, and I didn't really enjoy that a whole lot. But then the front end team needed a little bit of help, and so they asked me to help out. And I was like, yeah, okay, I can do JavaScript. Like, it looks kind of like Java a little bit. And I was really confused. What is this dollar thing that was jQuery, like hanging out in my JavaScript? Like, what the heck is all this stuff? And eventually it started to click, and I started to really, really like it. And then once I figured out how Node works and what jQuery is, and we were using Backbone, once I kind of got all that worked out, that initial like what is this stuff, I started really falling in love with the terseness of JavaScript, the freedom that it allows. Like, I realized that there are negative aspects to that as well. Like, now I have this like, my language isn't typed, and so I can make more mistakes and things. But especially as a beginner programmer, that was really liberating because I could do so many more things. And then the like feedback loop was so much faster too. I didn't have to wait for it to compile, and what I saw was more exciting. Like, when I was building my Java tools, lots of times I couldn't see anything. It was just like console output. I did build some Swing applications and stuff, but in JavaScript, it was all UI. I could see what I was building and interact with it, and I enjoyed that a lot more. So JavaScript was a natural fit for my preferences for the types of things that I wanted to build. And I just really fell in love with it at Domo.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. When I was programming, so when I was in school, my professor who retired, I believe it was my junior year, when we were doing C++, which was the first language we learned prior to getting into Java, he would actually have us handwrite our code and
Super
turn
fun.
it in. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why will I ever do this?
Yeah. I think sometimes academics like to teach you the way that they learned, or I don't know. Like, I if I were to do everything over again, I probably wouldn't do school. Now, I met my wife in school, so I would, if I were to do it over again, I'd go to school, meet my wife, and then I'd leave and go do a boot camp or something. Because I thought about this a lot. Like, I spent 5 years getting my master's degree. So if instead I went to one of these boot camps for I don't know, like 2 months or 3 or 4 months, and then spent the next like 2 or 3 years just like dorking around and like playing around with open source and building my own stuff, I still would have saved money and time than it like going to school. Now, like, I learned some valuable things at school that were helpful in my life and things, but most of my programming skills I picked up on the side on things I was doing on my own, because lots of times academics are a little out of touch with what's going on. At least like the professors I had, like that would be kind of offensive. That's not very nice. Like, that they're just separated from industry for many of them for a long time, and so like lots of the things that they're teaching are not really relevant anymore, especially in the world of JavaScript where things are changing so fast.
I agree 100%. And being a part-time professor myself, I can speak pretty closely to this. That I tell my students that are in a junior level class. I remember going in there just last semester and the first day saying, 80% of what I teach you in this class will be obsolete by the time you're applying these things when you graduate. And, that's 2 years from now. Because by the time you're a junior, you should already have the concepts and the core values that you will take, but the semantics of what you learn at that point, they change so rapidly. I can't go and say, hey, we're going to learn jQuery, and jQuery is no longer a thing, you know?
Right.
Or
Yeah. And I think that's really good of you to call that out. And I think what the natural like next thing to say would be like, so what you're going to learn in this class is how to learn.
exactly.
Because that's where the real value is coming from, is
You're
learning
right.
how to learn.
And I've gone down that kind of thought process when I think about my kids, and you know, do I want my kids to go to college? I really I don't know.
Hmm.
10 years ago, if you would have asked me that, I would have said absolutely they're going to go to college. They're going to get a degree. Now I'm kind of thinking, well, the ROI of going to college is kind of dwindling, because you can learn
Hmm.
so much online, and like you said, just getting involved in open source where you're developing, and other people are looking at your code and adding to it and improving upon it, and you're learning from what you see. That's so much more valuable, in my opinion, than going to college and having one professor grade you.
Yes. Yep. I totally can empathize with that feeling. I'm not sure what I want to do either with my kids.
So you mentioned earlier when you were tutoring some students, and how rewarding that was, and I've heard you talk in the past about how you learn from teaching. Can you give us some examples, or talk a little bit about your thoughts on teaching, and do you have to like know everything to start teaching, or how would one start that process?
Yeah, great questions. So yes, you like, so my learning process is pretty methodical, and so the way that I go through learning is I consume as much information as possible. That's the first step. Just like and very high level stuff. Like you don't have to go deep on things, but you should at least know what is current, what's coming up, what's in industry right now that's working. So read blog posts from companies that said, "Hey, we used Kubernetes and this is how it worked out," or like different things like that. And you can kind of focus on the things that interest you. Like I'm not super interested in Kubernetes, for example, but I know what it is, and I can talk intelligently about it. And so yeah, get a high level knowledge of most things that exist, that are of any relevance to you. That's the first step. And so you can do stuff like that by subscribing to newsletters and listening to podcasts. I don't really follow any one particular person's blog, but if there are some people in your industry that are blogging or tweeting things that are of relevance to you, then that's another good way to consume information. And so, yeah, just high level information of as many things as possible. And then you can kind of pick and choose which things you want to go deep on. And then when you get into the next phase, that can be useful. So then the next thing that you want to do is go out and build something. So that's really convenient when you have a full-time job and you can get paid to build stuff. Sometimes your job kind of picks and chooses the technologies that you use. But if you're able, try to build something that you are motivated intrinsically to build. It's something that you want to exist. So you're not building things so that you can go learn these technologies. You're building something that you are really like intrinsically motivated to have exist, something that you want to create. And that's this motivation-based learning. So when you're motivated intrinsically to build something, then you'll go find out how to make the technologies work. And so because you have this well of information of all the things that are out there, you can say, okay, I need to build this thing. I'm going to need a database, and I'm going to need like to use WebSockets, and I'm going to need to use like these different technologies. Then you can go out and find that and research more deeply the tools that you need to build that thing that you want to have exist. From there, you can get into like that process of building gives you a lot of experience, and that's where like rubber meets the road. You make a ton of mistakes. One of the cool things about software, if we compare it to like building actual like structures and buildings, is like when you're building a house, if you make a huge mistake, then you're out like a ton of money, and you have to like rip it all down and put it back up, and it's kind of a nightmare. Versus when you're building software, if you make a mistake, like unless it's like medical software and it's in production and it like kills somebody or something, that'd be terrible. But like if it's your side project, whatever, then you're only out your time. Like your materials are like nothing, basically. And so it's like take all the opportunities that you can to make mistakes, because that's where the real learning is going to happen. You're like, oh, I didn't realize that React worked that way. I thought it worked this way, and now I have this bug because of that assumption. And so now I have to fix this because now I understand how React works, or whatever the case may be. And so that process of building and making mistakes is where you're going to be learning. And so at first you consume information, then you build stuff based off of like something that you're really interested in having exist, that you're intrinsically motivated to build and complete. And then you go out and teach the things that you learned, the mistakes that you made, and and how you solved those problems. And a really important thing that I think a lot of people get wrong about this is they make the wrong assumption that, well, stuff like this already exists. Like somebody has already written a blog post about how JSX works, or somebody already wrote a blog post about what this means in JavaScript and whatever. And that's a huge mistake, because creating this teaching material, the blog post or the video or whatever you're going to do, the conference talk, whatever, that you're doing that not for like other people necessarily. You're doing it for yourself, for the learning process. So you're depriving yourself of something because somebody else did something. That doesn't make any sense. So and if you think about it in like to use a metaphor, you've got, if you've ever seen a Burger King right next to a McDonald's, like they're solving the same problem. They're both serving burgers, but they're doing it differently. And so that's and people still go to one or the other. So like you may, and in fact, there's even a place, I think it's in Texas, where there are 4 Starbucks, one on every corner on the same street corner. There's just one on every single corner. Like, why do they do that? Well, it's because people actually go to every single one. Like there's the business for it. And there's the software world is so big that there is a reason for you to create your own material, and it is still going to provide value. You can reach people differently from others. But even if that weren't the case, the learning experience that you get from teaching it is more than enough to go out and put the effort into teaching it. So that's where you really solidify your learning, is by teaching. And through this whole process, you try to make as much of it public as possible, because that can help you in your career as well. People don't know what they can't see, and so making the things that you're doing as public as possible can really help in your career as well. So there's like I said, I ramble, but there's a bunch of
that was super good, and it was really well said. The way that you talked about, being able to, just because something already exists doesn't mean that you can't add value with that. And I went through that same thought with this. Before I started this podcast, I actually recorded my first episode, a solo show by myself, and I sat on it for probably 6 weeks, because I was like, there's so many other tech podcasts out there. Why is mine any different? People are smarter than me. They've advanced more in their career than I have. What makes mine valuable? But over time, like you said, people come, they listen, they participate. And I feel like just by putting this out there, it holds me accountable to the leadership topics that I talk about, that I mentioned. It does put me into the public eye a little bit better for my career. But I learned from talking to people like you and other guests that I wouldn't have that opportunity if I didn't do this stuff. So I think it's extremely valuable to do that. Another thing
Absolutely.
that you said that I really liked was the make mistakes and share those mistakes. A lot of people feel like they can't put mistakes out publicly, but that's where you learn, is the mistakes.
Yeah, totally. And especially like for me, for some reason, lots of people seem to like me really well, and like the things that I say, and think that I'm a lot more skilled than I actually am. And so when I put my mistakes out there, I pretty much every time will get a Twitter direct message or something from somebody saying, "Hey, thank you for showing us that you're still human." Like, it really is helpful. So especially when you're in a position where people look up to you, sharing those mistakes can be inspiring as well.
You're absolutely right. And there's so many people out there who are kind of, they're getting discouraged with their software development progress or their speaking progress and so on and so forth, because they don't realize that they're comparing their behind the scenes with everybody else's highlight reels. And that's a quote that I still.
Yeah, that's a great quote. Where on earth did you get that? That's
I got
tweetable.
that from Stephen Furtick. That's I quote in one of his books.
That's fantastic.
But it's one of those things that I run into a lot too, is I have to stop myself and think, yeah, he's such a great speaker, but he wasn't always a great speaker, or he struggles and he works hard behind the scenes too. Just that 1 hour he's up on stage isn't the time he put into it. He probably put many hours prior to that, getting ready for this and preparing for this.
Yeah, totally. I remember a story of, like, I don't know if this is fictional or not, and I don't even know who the subject was, but like there was a great violinist who went up and performed and everything, and they were just amazing. And people came afterward and said, I'd give my right foot to be able to play as beautifully as you do. Or other people would say, like, I'd give 20 years of my life to be able to play as beautifully as you do. And this violinist said, well, I did give 20 years of my life to play this. Like, there's nothing intrinsically better about me than anybody else. I gave a silly amount of my time to this endeavor. And because of that, I can do this. And I think that's really important to recognize. Like, you see somebody do something amazing. I can appreciate that some people have a natural tendency toward different skills, but I have this really strong belief personally that our brains are muscles that can be exercised in different ways. And the things you spend your time doing are exercising your brain to work better at that thing. And so, yeah, like if you want to be really good at I'm talking to myself now. If I want to be really good at design, then I just need to put the time and effort into learning design. So finding things that really motivate you to like that motivation driven learning kind of process can, like, eventually you'll figure it out. You'll learn the things that you want to learn. And there's, like, you don't compare yourself to other people, because just like you said, I love that quote. You're comparing your behind the scenes with their highlight reels. That's a perfect quote. I love that.
Yeah. And what you said about motivation, that intrinsic motivation, I think that's really important, that the motivation has to come from within. It's because you're creating something, you're doing something that's satisfying within, not that somebody's giving you $1 to do something,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Not that your work projects can't teach you anything, but when things get really hard, if you're intrinsically motivated to build the thing that you're trying to create, then you'll keep going, even though it can be really frustrating.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about mistakes and failure. So what is one of your big failures that you've had that you've learned something from that you can share with us?
Yeah, well, so I mean, there's some silly things. Like in my first job, I had this bug that we had a chat in the application, and everybody at the company dog foods the application, and so in the chat, like, everybody has access to that chat, and there was a cross-site scripting vulnerability in the chat. So if I typed in some HTML, including like script tags and alerts and whatever else I could that would execute on everybody's computer. And so I was supposed to fix this, but the first thing that you do when you're going to fix something is you reproduce it to make sure that the bug exists and that you know how it's happening. And so I went to reproduce the bug, and I had an alert with "You've been hacked," but I didn't realize that I was actually reproducing it in production on our company's instance of the app. And so everybody all over the company started seeing "You've been hacked" on every page that they went to. No. And so I was like, oh shoot. And at that time we hadn't built in support for deleting messages yet. And so I couldn't remove it. I had to go find somebody with database access to go and delete the message. Oh boy, that was awful. And everybody's like, who's the idiot who yeah, that was me, sorry. So I learned from that, like, don't reproduce cross-site scripting bugs in production. That's a bad idea. Be aware of what environment you're testing things in. Probably don't reproduce any bugs in production, honestly. If you can help it. You might mess up data or something. That'd never be a good thing. Like drop the table or something. That'd be no fun. So I've got lots of silly mistakes like that. One kind of career focused mistake that has taught me a lot was when I started at PayPal. I had signed myself up, like before I started, actually, I accepted to speak at several conferences. And so when I started at PayPal, I started going to all these conferences. And my manager came to me and said, "Hey, like, we're so happy you're going to these conferences. It's good for PayPal, all that. But listen, do you know that like the time you're taking at these conferences basically amounts to 1 day out of 5 you're away at a conference, and you're not a developer evangelist for PayPal. Like, this isn't your job. We're happy to let you go do those things, but like, we're also paying you to build a product and stuff. We have some stories, and you're kind of letting your team down by going to all these conferences and not being available when we need you." And like, that's totally reasonable what they said, but I just like I threw a little tantrum, and I tweeted that, like, well, so apparently I can only go to one conference every quarter now. Like, that stinks. And I got into some trouble for that. Like, there's some companies that would fire me for tweeting something like that. And instead, PayPal was really gracious, and my boss's boss came and said, "Hey, listen, we're really sorry that you're upset about this, but listen, we didn't think that it was unreasonable for us to ask for you to like tone it down a little bit, because this is what we're paying you to do." And like, they were nicer to me than they had to be. And I realized that, like, oh, like, I was just being a privileged pain in the rear. Like, it's a privilege to be able to go to one conference and leave work for that. Then, like, because at PayPal, when you go to a conference, it doesn't count against your PTO, and at PayPal we have untracked PTO anyway. Oh, wow. And so like, the privilege is there, and I was just kind of taking advantage of that in not such a great way. So I learned from that experience that, like, to recognize my privilege and to appreciate the things that I have, and the goodness that like, that my company is paying, like, compensating me super well, and they're also letting me do a bunch of the things that I enjoy. And so don't throw a big tantrum on Twitter. And like, at the time, I think I had like 20,000 followers, so it wasn't insignificant. Lots of people looked up to me and knew that I worked at PayPal. They knew exactly what that tweet meant. And so it was don't bite the hand that feeds you, that kind of thing. Cause like, and it was just silly anyway. Just a little privileged whiny pants.
I think we've all been there before in situations very similar to that. And sometimes it's one of those things we need to do is just take a step back and realize how good we have it and be grateful. One of the things I'm trying to do is just to be grateful more often, and to think of like things that I'm grateful for on a daily basis, so I can just remind myself of how lucky I have it, and how just because of certain decisions that maybe I made or was influenced by other people or other things in my life that has gotten me to this point.
Yeah, totally. I think that's really important. Like, my brother, we just had a family reunion, and we had these, like, every morning we'd have these devotionals where somebody would talk about something. And my brother talked about how, like, our circumstances, lots of our circumstances are out of our control. But what is in our control is our attitude about those circumstances. And if we have a positive attitude, then generally, like, more positive things start happening to us or for us. We're generally happier about our circumstances, regardless of what they are. If we have a negative attitude, then the opposite happens, and generally more negative things start happening, and we're not as happy. And so because we only really have control over our attitude, then we should make it as positive as possible. And it's scientifically proven that your attitude is influenced by your gratitude. And so the more gratitude that you have, the more positive attitude and outlook you can have on the things that happen around you. And you'll generally find yourself more happy. So he encouraged, and I should probably do this. I haven't done this like he said I should, but he encouraged everybody to keep a journal and write one happy thing or list out happy things or like things that you're grateful for every single day. So that's maybe something I'm going to start to do today, because I think that's a really good advice. I've started to journal, and that introspection is really useful. So expressing a little bit of gratitude would probably be good too.
That's great. Yeah. Well, do you have any advice that you would want to leave the folks with as far as leadership or, just getting out there? I know that before we got on the call, you were talking that, sometimes you don't feel like you're a leader, but I do think you're definitely a thought leader in the space for sure.
Well, that's nice of you to say. So I was a team lead for maybe a year or so last year, and I did not do a good job. I'm just not a good people leader, I guess, or manager. But I do like to help other people, and the way that I lead is I try to lead in the or increase the impact of my work. So like if I'm working on a presentation or something for my coworkers, like here, let's talk about how arrow functions work or whatever it is, then I make that material available publicly. Like there's nothing proprietary about that information or whatever. So I can, instead of just showing it to my coworkers, I can record myself showing it to my coworkers and then publish it out publicly. So this idea of doing as much of what you can in public can really help you become a leader and somebody who helps other people in the real world. So taking advantage of the value that you're creating just naturally out of normal living, and then converting that into something that other people can benefit from. That's why, like, I also have this thing I call tech chats, where if I want to learn about a specific technology or I want to ask somebody some questions, then we'll do it on Google Hangouts on Air, and that'll go to YouTube automatically. And so our conversation that we have about like what's Git rebase or whatever it is can benefit more people. And generally, you'll find that when you're doing that, people are more willing to talk with you. And that's something you've discovered doing this podcast, I'm sure, is that like if you wanted to just have one-on-one conversations with people, it'd be a lot harder to get people to agree. But since this is going to go out to all of your listeners, then and be something that like I can reference to people and say, hey, go listen to that podcast. I answered your question, whatever there. People are much more willing to talk with you. And that's actually why I started the podcast that I did a couple of years ago, was so that I could talk to people and ask them questions, get them to listen to me. So yeah, doing as much of what you're like, everybody's creating value. You're just like, you're constantly, the conversations you're having, whether you're listening to somebody who's answering your questions or you're the one answering the questions, you're creating value doing that. So find a way to take the value you're creating and make it more available, and you'll find that the impact of your work is increased. So that's the advice I'd leave with you.
No, that's great advice, and you're absolutely right. Just by having a podcast, and actually I was giving this advice to someone recently. We were talking about how to start a nonprofit for impacting mental health, and I said, you know what? If you really want to talk to these people and get advice about starting this nonprofit, start a podcast and invite them on. I mean, I've had generals come on my podcast. I've talked to best-selling authors and people that would normally not give me an hour of their time, to have a discussion, just because, there's something publicly available that can benefit, more than just one person. So yeah, that's really good advice.
That's great. Awesome.
Well, how can people find out more about you or listen to some of your talks or get some of this value that you're adding out there?
So I'm Kent C. Dodds on everything, on Twitter, GitHub. My website is kentcdodds.com, and I've got links there. Just I'm kind of everywhere. Just you can Google Kent C. Dodds and you'll find me. I'm that's part of the reason I'm intentional about my middle name is it's so distinctive. Like there's no way you'll find anybody else but me. So
Well, that's great. All right, we'll link that up in the show notes as well. And thank you so much.
thank you very much. It's been awesome.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, please head over to iHeartRadio, Apple, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you listen to these shows, and leave me a rating, review, follow, subscribe, all those nonsense things that they ask you to do, because it really helps out the show and it helps spread the word so that other people will join and listen and hopefully become better leaders themselves, and we can make a bigger impact in the world. So with all that being said, please share the show with your friends. If they're not a subscriber but they do work in technology, steal their phone, subscribe for them. Just kidding about that. But seriously, share the show. It means a lot to me, and would help a lot of people out if they also hear these messages about leadership and just being a better developer and a better engineer and a better person in general. So I appreciate all that you guys have done. I appreciate the reviews, the ratings, and the shares. The listenership has grown over the past several weeks and months, and hopefully it'll continue to do that. So please share the show, leave me a rating and review, and that would be awesome. Thanks so much.